Have you ever wondered why two dates can look almost identical from the outside? Same amount of laughter, same good restaurant, same easy conversation, and yet one turns into a real relationship while the other quietly fades into nothing. Why some connections seem to deepen effortlessly, week after week, while others stall out no matter how much chemistry seemed to be there at the start. For decades, this looked like a mystery. Some people just called it compatibility and left it at that, as if it were some invisible force you either had with someone or didn't. But relationship researchers have actually spent years studying this question with real data, recording thousands of hours of couples interacting, tracking who stayed together and who didn't. And they found something remarkable. The difference between connections that deepen and connections that fizzle often comes down to something surprisingly small. Not grand romantic gestures, not perfectly matched interests. It comes down to how two people respond to tiny, almost invisible moments, dozens of times a day. Researchers call these moments bids for connection. And once you learn to see them, you cannot unsee them. Not in your dating life, not in your friendships, not in your family. Today, we're going to break down exactly what emotional bids are, the research behind why they matter so much, and how you can use this single concept to build real trust and safety with someone from the very first date. This is one of the most practical, immediately usable pieces of relationship science that exists. Let's get into it. Part 1. The concept. What is an emotional bid? The concept of emotional bids comes largely from the work of the Gottman Institute, founded by psychologist John Gottman, who is often described as one of the most influential relationship researchers of the last 50 years. Gottman's team spent decades observing couples, sometimes in controlled lab settings nicknamed the Love Lab, logging their interactions down to the smallest details, and following up with those same couples years later to see who was still together, who was happy, and who wasn't. Out of that research came a deceptively simple idea. Throughout any day, in any relationship, romantic, platonic, or otherwise, people make small attempts to connect with each other. Gottman called these bids. A bid is any small verbal or nonverbal attempt for attention, affirmation, affection, or connection. It's a moment where one person essentially says, in some form, I want to share something with you. Will you notice me right now? Bids are almost never dramatic. That's what makes them so easy to miss if you don't know to look for them. A bid might be your date pointing out an interesting cloud shape and saying, look at that. It might be someone sending a meme mid-conversation with no other message attached, just the meme, an implicit, this made me think of you. It might be a small question, like, how was your day actually? Asked with real curiosity rather than as a script. It might be someone sharing a tiny, seemingly unimportant detail from their life, a weird thing their coworker said, a song stuck in their head, a memory triggered by something on the table in front of them. None of these moments are, on their own, a big deal. But here's the thing Gottman's research revealed. It's not the content of the bid that matters most. It's what happens next. Part 2. The science. Turning toward away or against. Gottman identified 3 possible responses to any bid, and the pattern of these responses over time turned out to be one of the single strongest predictors of relationship success his research ever found. The first response is turning toward. This means acknowledging the bid, engaging with it, however briefly. If your date says, look at that cloud, turning toward might just be glancing up and saying, oh, whoa, that actually does look like a dragon. If someone sends a meme, Turning toward is responding with genuine engagement, laughing, riffing on it, asking where they found it, rather than leaving it on read or replying with a flat LOL. Turning toward doesn't require a huge reaction. It just requires presence. It communicates on a level far beneath conscious thought. I see you. You matter to me. I'm here. The second response is turning away. This is when a bid is missed or ignored, not necessarily out of malice, often just out of distraction, tiredness, or being absorbed in something else. Your date points at the cloud, and you're scrolling your phone and don't look up. Someone shares a small story from their day, and it gets met with silence or an abrupt subject change. Turning away is rarely intentional cruelty. It's often just inattention. But here's the critical part. To the person making the bid, it doesn't feel neutral. Repeated turning away registers, even subconsciously, as I don't matter enough here to be noticed. The third response is turning against. This is a more active, negative reaction to a bid, dismissiveness, sarcasm that stings rather than connects, irritation at being interrupted, or outright criticism. Your date shares something they're excited about, and it's met with an eye roll or a put down. This is the least common of the three, but it does the most damage because it doesn't just fail to build connection. It actively teaches the other person that bidding for your attention is unsafe. Here's the finding that made this research so influential. In long-term studies of married couples, Gottman's team found that couples who went on to divorce turned toward each other's bids only around a third of the time, on average, while couples who remained happily together over the long term turned toward each other's bids roughly 9 times out of 10. That is an enormous gap, and it wasn't driven by huge relationship-defining moments. It was built entirely out of thousands of tiny, mundane interactions, the cloud, the meme, the small question, accumulating over years. Now here's why this matters so much for early dating specifically, maybe even more than for established relationships. In the earliest stages of getting to know someone, you don't yet have a foundation of trust to fall back on. You don't have years of history reassuring you that this person is safe, or that a missed bid was just a distracted moment rather than a sign of disinterest. Early on, every bid and every response to it carries outsized weight because it's actively building, or failing to build, the very foundation of trust that determines whether you'll ever get to the point of having that history at all. This is also, quietly, one of the clearest signals of compatibility that exists, arguably far more reliable than the surface level chemistry most people focus on. Anyone can have witty banter on a first date. What reveals far more about someone's capacity for a healthy relationship is what they do with the small, unremarkable moments where you open a door for connection. Do they walk through it? Do they miss it because they're not really paying attention? Or do they, even subtly, shut it down? Part 3. Learning to see bids in others and yourself. Before we get to the practical strategies, let's slow down on something important. Bids are often quiet, and if you're not specifically looking for them, it's genuinely easy to miss both the ones being made toward you and the ones you're making yourself. On a date, bids can look like almost anything. A pause in conversation where your date glances at you a beat longer than necessary, as if checking whether you're still engaged. That's a bid for reassurance. Someone bringing up a topic they clearly have more to say about, then trailing off. That's often a bid to be asked a follow-up question, an invitation to go deeper, a joke that falls a little flat but was clearly an attempt to make you laugh. That's a bid for connection through humor, and it deserves acknowledgement even if the joke itself didn't land perfectly. Physical bids exist too. A light touch on the arm during a funny story, angling their body toward you rather than away. These are nonverbal attempts at closeness that are just as real as verbal ones. It's worth naming something here gently. Many people, particularly those who've experienced anxiety around dating or past relationship pain, have learned, often without realizing it, to downplay or suppress their own bids out of fear of seeming too eager, too needy, or too easily hurt if the bid gets missed. If you've ever stopped yourself from sharing something exciting because you didn't want to seem too much, or swallowed a small hurt when a text went unanswered rather than naming it, you've experienced this firsthand. There's no judgment here. It's an incredibly common, very human protective habit, but it's worth knowing that making bids, even small vulnerable ones, is not neediness. It's the actual mechanism by which closeness gets built. Connection cannot happen if no one is making any bids at all. Part 4. Actionable advice. Putting this into practice. Let's turn this into something you can actually use on your very next date or in your very next text conversation. Strategy 1. Practice active noticing. On your next date, make a small private goal of simply noticing bids as they happen, without needing to do anything dramatic in response. You'll likely be surprised how many there are once you start looking. A comment that lingers a second too long. A question asked with a bit more care than small talk usually gets. A story shared with visible hope that you'll find it interesting too. You don't need to catch every single one. The goal is training your attention. The same way learning any new skill starts with simply paying closer attention than usual. Strategy 2. Turn toward in small, low-effort ways. Turning toward doesn't require grand responses. It's often as simple as a follow-up question. Wait, what happened after that? Or reflecting back, genuine interest. I love that you still remember the words to that song. If a joke is made, laugh, even a little, even if it's not your exact sense of humor. The acknowledgement matters more than the comedic quality. If someone shares something small about their life, resist the urge to immediately redirect to your own related story before genuinely engaging with theirs first. This single habit, engaging with their bid fully before pivoting to your own, is one of the most underrated conversational skills in early dating. Strategy 3. Make your own bids and let them be small. You don't need a grand, emotional confession to build connection. Small bids are just as powerful and often more sustainable to offer consistently. Point out something interesting. Share the small, slightly embarrassing thing that's actually on your mind. Ask a genuinely curious follow-up question instead of a scripted one. Send that meme. Text, "This made me think of you," even about something minor. Each small bit is a tiny act of trust, an offering of, "Here's a piece of me. Are you interested?" And offering them consistently in low-stakes ways is how safety gets built incrementally, without either person needing to be vulnerable all at once. Strategy 4. Notice patterns, not single moments. One missed bid on one date is not a red flag. Everyone gets distracted. Everyone has an off day. Everyone occasionally misses something because they're nervous or tired. The signal worth paying attention to is the pattern over time. Across several interactions, does this person tend to turn toward your bids more often than not? Do they ask follow-up questions about things you've mentioned before, showing they were actually listening? Or is there a consistent pattern of your bids landing flat, being redirected, or met with subtle dismissiveness? Patterns, not individual moments, are the real signal. Gottman's own research was built on aggregate behavior over time, not single interactions. Strategy 5. Respond honestly, even to turning away. If you notice a pattern of your bids being consistently missed, it's okay, even healthy, to name it gently rather than silently absorbing it, or escalating your bids to try to force a reaction. Something as simple as, "Hey, I mentioned that thing twice now, and I don't think you caught it. Just wanted to share it," is honest, low conflict, and gives the other person real information and a real chance to turn toward you. How someone responds to that kind of gentle, direct communication is itself incredibly valuable data about their capacity for the kind of relationship you are looking for. Strategy 6. Watch for turning against and take it seriously. Unlike a missed bid, an active, dismissive, or sarcastic response to a genuine bid, especially if it happens more than once, is worth paying real attention to. If sharing something you're excited about is met with mockery, or vulnerability is met with an eye roll, that's meaningfully different from simple distraction. It doesn't necessarily mean someone is a bad person, but it is a real signal about emotional safety, and it's worth trusting that signal rather than minimizing it because the chemistry otherwise feels good. Strategy 7. Extend the same generosity to yourself. If you catch yourself having missed someone else's bid, distracted, in your head, nervous, you don't need to spiral into self-criticism. Simply circling back later, "Hey, earlier you mentioned something, and I don't think I really responded. Tell me more," is itself a powerful act of turning toward, even delayed. Repair matters just as much as getting it right the first time. In dating, just as much as in long-term relationships. Part 5. Reframing. Love built in small moments. Here's the reframe I want to leave you with. Somewhere along the way, a lot of us absorb the idea that real connection announces itself loudly, through fireworks, through grand gestures, through an instant, overwhelming certainty that this is different from everything before it. And sometimes those big, dramatic moments do happen. But the research on what actually predicts lasting relationships tells a quieter, more hopeful story. Trust isn't usually built in a single conversation. It's built in the accumulation of small moments. The cloud you both looked at, the meme that got a real laugh, the follow-up question that showed someone was actually listening. Every one of those small moments is a tiny brick. No single brick makes a foundation. But laid consistently, over time, with two people who keep showing up for each other in small ways, those bricks become something sturdy enough to build a real relationship on. This is genuinely good news, especially if grand romantic gestures have never come naturally to you, or if you felt like you're bad at putting yourself out there in some big, dramatic way. You don't need fireworks. You need presence. You need the willingness to notice and the willingness to be noticed. That's it. That's the actual mechanism. So on your next date or in your next text conversation with someone you're getting to know, try this. Notice the small moments. Turn toward them, even in tiny ways, and to offer a few small bids of your own without needing them to be perfect. You might be surprised how much closer real connection feels once you stop looking for it in the big moments and start building it brick by brick in the small ones. If this framework was useful to you, stay with us. Next, we'll be looking at how these same early patterns of trust either turn into secure, resilient connection or quietly erode into the anxious dynamics so many people find themselves stuck in. One video at a time, we're building a real toolkit for the kind of love that actually lasts.